Hey, Jim Toscano here, and welcome to the Monday Night Live Stream, Filling in the Grooves. And I have a special guest tonight who I will introduce in just a moment. I just want to thank a couple of companies, Sabian Cymbals, ProLogic Practice Pads, Offset Pedals, and Black Magic Designs for their wonderful switchers. I'm using the new one tonight. This thing is fun. Oh, my goodness. And tonight, I actually have another Irishman like we had last week with Famularo. So we have the legendary, and this man really needs no introduction, but David Garibaldi is with me tonight, and you probably know him as the drummer of Tower of Power for many, many decades. And we're going to get into that, and we're going to get into his books and DVDs and some other projects that he has coming up, and we're going to talk about how we met. So with no further ado, here is David Garibaldi, my special guest.
A pleasure, sir.
So, I just real quick, I have to definitely mention that we kind of met through the technology thing that kind of
That's
happened
correct.
with the shutdown of COVID. And I'm not going to
That's
go
correct.
heavy into technology because we've already done that. You and I did an interview about how the technology thing affected everybody and how the shutdown affected everybody, really. And you and I met over how to make the tech work, right? So maybe
Correct.
we'll do a little bit on that.
Sure. Whatever.
Yeah, yeah. And
I'm still very lame. I still need your assistance. I still, it's still 911 calls that.
yeah, well, there's less 911 calls,
Yeah.
and your setup is pretty state of the art now, and you've even gone into the nicer cameras, and you're using
Yeah.
the video switchers and all that good stuff. And actually, you have a cool. We did a little setup together where we have your overhead cam going into your shot, right? So maybe you can
Can
show
people
that.
are people seeing this?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. We can see that.
Okay, and then we have this. If I can, we have that. No, wait a minute. There.
Oh, overhead and side cam. Yeah, yeah. So that's great. So for the teaching thing, that comes in handy. But also you're shooting video content for Hudson,
Yes.
and so those are sort of video tutorials. Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Well, I have this book idea called DG's Notebook, which is um, based on my practice notebook. This.
Oh, nice.
And so these are like my practice notes. Here's something from August 4th of last year. You see that?
Oh,
There.
yeah. So these are the basically what you are writing down stuff that ideas that
Yeah,
you're coming up with.
it's like a weird kind of like it's sort of a journal. I got into doing this like years and years ago. Like man, I was really young because I wanted to see what it looked like what I was playing. I just wanted to see what if I could write it out,
Right.
and that sort of turned into a way that I used to build my vocabulary. It's a real important tool in my practicing. So I have this notebook. I've got several of them over the years, and they just fill them up with stuff. And so I use it. It becomes like a database for all the things I do. Stuff with Tower Power, stuff with other people, magazine ideas, articles. Book ideas, all that stuff. And so it's kind of this fluid sort of thing. And so at any point, maybe if I'm inspired, I would go back into a previous notebook and look at an idea. And if it excites me, then I'll develop it further, right? So when I practice, whatever kind of hits my head as something kind of cool, I write it down,
That's
and
great.
then that gets developed. I had something. Here's a crazy note right here. I don't know if you. Here's something I found, and I started messing around with it today. Um, that's what this kind of weird sketch looks like.
Oh, wow.
It's just some notes,
Yeah.
but I'm going to turn it into some stuff.
Oh, that's
So
so great.
this is like 13s and 11s, and this is from August 20th of last year. And I just found this thing, you know, a rogue piece of paper with some stuff on it.
I too have many scribblings of rhythmic ideas and stuff. And it's funny, right? What you were saying before is if you really like it, you come back to it and then you try to
Yeah,
develop it. And then that idea might turn into pages of ideas just from spawning that one idea, right?
that's correct. So here's like something I was fooling around with earlier. There's a study in future sounds called permutation study number 11. Right?
Yes.
So, okay, I'll let that go for a second. Can I
Yeah,
hit for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Am I gonna mess
Please.
anything up?
No, not at all.
All right, so let's get the pimpy view.
Yeah, we got the pimped out view.
Yeah. So permutation study number 11 is a linear 16th note phrase, and it sounds like this: 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like that. So you take that idea and you permutate that by 16th notes. This is from the Future Sounds book. So you take the last note that is in exercise 1, and that becomes beat 1 of exercise 2. Everything moves over the 16th note, right? So Future Sounds style, you play time, then you play, here's exercise 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so forth. And it goes on. So you get all that. So then I started fooling around with this for this is labeled PASIC 2020. So this is
Wow.
like this last year in November, PASIC. I started fooling around with this thing, and I kind of come up with some ways that you can kind of expand it. So I like the whole idea of quarter note permutation. It's a simpler way to sort of think about it. It still works.
Right.
So instead of organizing everything by the 16th notes, you do it in groups of quarter notes, right? So this is 1, 2, 3. That's the basic idea. So I take the last quarter note and I move that around to the front. But how I get there is this first 4-note phrase, I repeat it and then subtract it. So it takes me to the next permutation. So it sounds like this: 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 2, 3, 4. 3, 2, 3, 4. 4. Now we're into the second. And it goes like that, right?
Oh, wow.
So then I took it another step further, and where this step hi-hat is, the very first note, you can permutate it by 16th, that same 16th note thing that's in the beginning, just by adding another note and then subtracting it. So that, I did it with the bass drum. And this one sounds like 2, 1, 2, here's number 1. 1. 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Now you're into number 3. So it just kind of advances everything. So you add and subtract, right? So then, is this not where you wanted to go with all this
No,
stuff?
this is absolutely fine. So happy to hear you playing stuff. For sure.
So then the next section, this is part 5. So there's 10 parts that kind of messing around with all this. So this one, instead of adding the 2 bass drums, you add a ghosted note. Like that. So there's number 1, 2, Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. And now you're number 3. So it just kind of does the same thing, but it advances it, right? It's by a 16th note every time you add or subtract an additional note, right? So I also have this weird thing I like to do with ideas and turn them into triplets, because I really dig the Afro-Cuban 6/8.
Right.
So when I was with the Talking Drums trio, we did all kind of 6/8 stuff, and so I would take the 6/8 and I wouldn't do it in a traditional sort of way. I learned all the traditional stuff, right?
Right.
But then I would take it and I would expand it and play like kind of weird funk beats, but use triplets, So that got me into thinking, well, what if I take some of the 16th note ideas I do and just convert it to triplets? So a 16th note equals an 8th note.
Right. Right.
Right?
So you're basically taking the same formation and then just changing the rate.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the first idea we did, 1, 2, 3, 4. That, if I convert that to triplets, that's 16 eighth notes. And that will go through 4 measures of 4/4 3 times. It creates a cycle, right? So this, kind of what I do with my students is, this is really good for counting. You're right. Because counting is like, that's your GPS. If you're not counting, you're not into counting, you're going to really be very limited in your ability to expand things.
Right.
So counting is really cool because it'll always teach you where 1 is, so you never get lost. And you can go as crazy as you want. You never get lost. And once it's ingrained in there, you know how to, the GPS is turned on, it's tracking, right? Then you always know where you are. So this idea, we're going to play that as triplets. And it's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3. So sometimes I use. Is this cool to do this?
Oh yeah. Go for it, man.
Tell us now.
100%.
Okay, hold on. Here's I use like clicks of, I have all these percussion things in here. So let me put one up here that I kind of mess around with a lot.
Yeah.
That has some kind of cool. Okay, so there's like 6/8 right there.
Yep.
And it's got that weird thing with the conga slap on the second note of the triplet.
Yep.
So there's where the time is right there. Let me move this up, turn it up a little, get it a little faster. Okay, so that's 110. So a dotted quarter equals 110, 110 beats a minute. Right. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. That kind of stuff. A little sloppy, but you get the idea.
Yeah, but that's so great, and those same ideas of taking like rudimental stuff that's 16th note based and converting it, changing the rate into triplet is something I do with my little workshop all the time, and it's such a great way to expand your awareness of the time, right?
Yes.
Just moving that same exact pattern. That was very, very cool. And I love that you're using, instead of just a click, you're using, some patterns that you've programmed in your drum machine. And it just makes it that much more musical.
sometimes I play along with music. You know, there's some really cool music that I like that I actually. Do you have time to do this? Do we have time to do this?
We have all the time you want. Absolutely, man. This is such a treat because, my silly questions can wait. We're getting to hear you play, and
Oh,
that's
we'll
a
do
rare treat.
questions in a sec. We'll do whatever you want to do in a second here. But I just
No, take your time.
while I'm fooling around with this, um, I use I find like tracks that kind of have some of the stuff in it that I like, conceptually, and then I just mess around with stuff. So this is uh, Jerry Gonzalez and the Fort Apache Band. You know those guys?
Yeah.
Jerry Gonzalez. And so one of my favorite bands ever. And so let's see if you can even hear this. Can you hear that? So you take that same 16th note idea like this.
Oh, that's great.
That was the same thing, just in a more musical context with some fills, and you can start it wherever you want, really. You know.
Wow. And now, so these ideas that you're writing down, even though some of it has spawned from Future Sounds, I mean, this is going to be a new book in the making with a lot of these ideas.
I don't know what it's going to be. Well, no, the notebook idea. That's going to be called DG's Notebook. That's,
Okay.
I'm in the process of writing it as we speak,
Gotcha.
And so it just so happened from having to have something to do at a clinic.
Right, right.
You're not doing the same stuff all the time, put this kind of stuff together.
Yeah. And I think I saw a couple of the sheets that you had put together for the online virtual PASIC this past year. And that came from this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you had shown me some of that. That's so great. And
it did. So, like in this context, so that particular idea, you can use, bells and other stuff, Mm. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The same thing, you just kind of orchestrate it, with different stuff,
absolutely. Oh my God.
All right, so I finished. I'm done.
No, what a great treat. I didn't know we were going to go there, and I'm so happy that we did.
Well, I didn't
we got
know
to
we were
hear.
going to either, but then we started talking about stuff, and,
Keep your sticks handy because we may be doing more of this. Oh, man. Well, and what's funny is, looking at the kit, and, I watched a bunch of clips earlier today as I was thinking about, different points in your career. And there was one live thing that I had seen of you with Tower where you were using bells, cowbells like that, and sort of incorporating them in your patterns. And then I'd also seen sort of a lineage of your drum kit and how you're playing on a much smaller kind of setup now. And is that the case if you are to go out, let's say this coming year, and get to tour again? Are you on a smaller kit than you had been in the past for the Tower thing?
Yeah, this setup right here that you're looking at, this is kind of a version of what I started out with when I first joined the band in 1970. I just didn't have this hi-hat and I didn't have a bell, but I had just, regular 2 toms, a bass drum, and a snare, right?
Yeah.
So I have a small space here in my studio, and I had more drums set up, but I started, hanging out with you and then adding all this gear. So I don't have room for stuff in here. So I got rid of some of it and just kind of set up something that felt really, really comfortable. And I think that when we start up again, I'm going to, when and if that happens, I'm going to use this setup.
Yeah. It's such a, I mean, obviously it's more compact, but it's such a musical setup, and I guess you've been playing on this for a while now, yeah, right? And I would imagine that that's kind of the comfort zone now, right? As far as
It's great.
from a musical perspective as well.
Yeah, I like. I'll probably adjust a couple things and maybe have another snare over here, like I'm using this for a music stand, but a gear stand rather. But I'll probably have another, my other snare over here, maybe one more cymbal, but I think it's going to be this. I don't like to have to reach for stuff,
Right.
you know. So everything is kind of ergonomically fits really well, I just kind of make it so that I can just move my hand and something is there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, stark contrast to like the bigger kits in the past, and sort of even the heights of things that I remember seeing on your kit, even on the DVDs, was pretty different, right?
Well, I was really into for a while. I was really into like, you know, Alphonse Mouzon and some of these guys. They had their stuff up, cymbals up real high, and so you're kind of like let the stick sort of, you know, at this angle, kind of,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of weird, but you get the idea, like that,
Yep.
up high. So you're using this motion here. So
Um, yeah, yeah. And I just real quick, because we were talking about the books before, I just wanted to mention, and I'll ask you a couple of things about it. But Timba Funk, Talking Drums, Timba Funk. Um, so playing with Michael Spiro and Jesus Diaz, right? So,
yes,
and then
sir.
of course the Funky Beat is another one. And I actually have real quick. I'm gonna just show a screen capture of the Hudson window, and on the Hudson window I have Future Sounds, and I have these digital versions of your books, which if you guys don't have these on Future Sounds, you can see the Funky Beats coming up here. And this is just a great way to have the whole collection on all your devices. So I just wanted to mention that real quick. I did a little tutorial recently showing people how to go on and buy these things. So um, talk about that experience of working on talking drums.
Talking drums. Okay, we still are officially together, even though we're not doing gigs. We never officially broke up because it just was a deal where we were all working, we were all busy doing stuff, and so we just kind of went our separate ways. But always, at some point, wanted to do it again. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get together. I'm already working with Spyro on something right now, but the talking drums material, that book Tiempo, Timba Funk, that was our first one. Then the second one was Tiempo, and then so the video that we did and the two books were meant to be a trilogy. There was design and all that, and so it was kind of like we'd finish one and then get started on the next one, and then that led to the next one, and blah blah blah. So it was this kind of treatise on, our music, how we put it together, and presenting, folkloric, Afro-Cuban folkloric stuff with kind of a modern sort of twist on it, that kind of deal. So we were really active for about 10 years. We did a lot of gigs. We toured. We did a ton of clinics. So it was an experience that changed really how I viewed a lot of things about rhythm. So those guys taught me a lot about, understanding clave and how that works in the music, and just be free, and not worry about structure so much, and just play and let things kind of flow, right? So it made my ears kind of opened them up in a whole different way. And so I had all this drum stuff to sort of build around, all this percussion, because the guys were playing bata and conga and all that stuff. So it gave me an opportunity to expand my vocabulary. I learned some more traditional sort of parts, and then I would take some of that and I would mess with it and create a drum set part so that the snare drum, hi-hat, and bass drum were always kind of in there, but they were like this real kind of weird hybrid of stuff,
Would you mind putting on your main side cam? Because we're looking at your overhead and we want to see your beautiful face. Yes. And thank you. And I think you were saying to me that, those guys, they're so deeply schooled on that stuff, on all the Afro-Cuban stuff. And you kind of were able to come in and sort of adapt what you do to that, right?
Yeah, well, Jesus, he comes from Cuba. He grew up in that tradition. Some of his family, they were, santeros and in the Abuaqua and all this other stuff, so he heard it and grew up in it. One of the most creative people I've ever met, crazy creating stuff, and Michael Spiro, who is, there's both of those guys are santeros, so they understand the culture and all of that stuff. And Spiro, he understands the Cuban side, he understands the Brazilian side. He kind of can put them both together. He understands how the differences between each. He knows all the bad cats in all those things.
Yeah. He's incredible.
Guys
I mean, and he started kind of late, I think, right? Around 19 or so.
Yeah, I guess, he's one of those guys where, and actually both of them are like that. I don't know if you've ever been around people where you spend time with them and you reflect on the time that you spent and you realize that you learned something. And so they're probably the only people that I've ever been around where we would hang out, tell crazy stories and, drink beer and mess around and have fun. But at the same time, there's a lot of great music going on, always playing, always talking about the music, So for me, it was like school,
Right.
It was incredible.
Yeah, and those DVDs are really, really incredible.
And I'm working with Spyro now. Actually, we're doing we did some recording years ago, and just he and I, just drum stuff, and so we decided that now that all this COVID stuff is going on, everybody's shut down, that we would just kind of start working on it again. So for the last few months, we've been kind of piecing it all together, and so we have a ways to go yet, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
if you ask me.
And so when you guys were doing Talking Drums like more regularly, you guys did some touring with that. So how was that, like going out on stage and being able to do that stuff?
It was fun. We did this really cool event in Amsterdam, and that was where all the gigs, they were all around the Netherlands, and the first gig was in I think it was in Amsterdam, and we came out and we had sponsored by their drum magazine, and Irk Willemsen was the guy that was running the magazine, and he put together this festival called the Big Bang, and it was really slick. All these drum groups from all over the place and fabulous players. And we come out there the first night, and the place is packed with people, and they knew everything we were doing. They were totally into it. They knew the songs. They knew the whole thing. We were blown away.
Wow.
Really knowledgeable audience. Typical European audience, that knows what they're listening to.
Right.
you know. It was really great, you know. So that was a moment I'll never forget it. It was just the whole experience was just fantastic, you know.
Now, was this kind of going on during sort of your hiatus from Tower, and you started
Yeah,
to explore that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Probably in the so from about 1990 to about 2000, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
that period of time, you know. And Spyro, see what I had moved back to the Bay Area from LA, and I was looking for somebody to teach me about Afro-Cuban music. I wanted to know all about it. And
Right.
because that's a big, it's big here, you know, in the Bay Area. There was like bands and a lot of Cuban guys live here, and they had all kinds of crazy stuff happening, you know, that you could go check out. And so everybody told me, well, you got to go see Michael Spyro. All right. So we met. I went over to his house for a lesson, and it, you know, turned into like a collaboration almost immediately. You know, I mean, seriously. And I started immediately, I started bringing him on clinics with me. And he said, well, you got to meet this guy, Jesus Diaz. Okay. So there was a band that they had called Guayacan, and they were playing at the Caribe Dance Center in downtown Oakland. And this band had like horns and, you know, cool, you know, folkloric stuff that they were doing, and Jesus was in it. So Spyro says, come and check him out. So I went over there, and Jesus got really weirded out because I'm staring at him the whole gig, right? So we we met, and we played together once, and that was it. You know, that was the trio right there. I didn't know anything. These guys know everything, and I know nothing, but we already have something, you know.
Right.
So we just kind of kept it going and built it, and it was a cool experience. You know, our gigs. One thing we would do that was really fun was each night the whoever turn it was picked the opening thing to do, like a groove or idea, right? And then we would just jam together. So it rotated. So each gig was a different guy coming out to start the night, you know, and start a groove. It's just something that we would all kind of blow on, you know, and
Right.
listen. And some of the stuff got to be where we would listen to each other, and it sounded actually kind of composed, you know, in a way after a while. You know, it was pretty interesting.
It's like bringing all those kindred spirits together and then just letting it happen on stage. That's rare, right? To get that
Yeah,
opportunity where it's not all rehearsed and
yeah, it was pretty fun, pretty cool. You know,
wow.
great learning. You know.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God. What a great experience. I wanted to kind of dig into your, speaking of kindred spirits, your relationship, drummer to bass player relationship with Rocco from
Mm.
Tower, because you mentioned, basically, um, if Rocco was a drummer, he would play like you, and if you were a bass player, you would play kind of like him. And you said that in an interview at one point, just kind of saying how you guys really did. You didn't have to talk about it. It kind of just worked with the two of you.
Yeah, Rocco was like a real intuitive sort of guy. He had his own kind of vibe that he was doing at all times. His own sort of muse, you know. He was very unusual, super talented. You know, didn't really care about the bass. If he was playing the bass, he liked it. If he wasn't playing the bass, he didn't think about it. You know, it was like that.
Wow.
You know, so he'd pick up the bass and just cool stuff would happen. And then he'd put the bass down, and you know, I mean, it was so intuitive. I mean, he didn't really even really care about knowing about music. He just played the bass. Kind of made up his weird little technique that he used to play, you know, that was totally hybrid. I think the first bass that he was using when I started playing with him, he had this piece of foam that was down by the bridge of the bottom of the guitar there, and he had this foam in there because he didn't have enough technique to stop the notes. So he put that there, and so all the notes were short.
Wow. So that was muting the notes.
Yeah.
By shoving it in there. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
So that's kind of the way that he did it, and then he actually learned how to do it a little bit with his fingers, so that he had that muted kind of thumpy sort of deal, But when I went to hear the band the first time, before I was in it, he was kind of the sound of the band. It was so unusual. They're doing like obscure cover songs and original songs. They're like 18 years old, and they just have this cool vibe already. And Rocco was, a huge part of that sound. That bottom end of of his. It was just so slick. And then we started playing together. We just kind of fell into it, immediately.
And
it was like that.
Would you say that you never really found another bass player along your travels that had that kind of connection?
Well, there's another guy here, the guy that took Rocco's place, actually, Mark Van Bakkening, the Dutch guy. He lives here in the Bay Area. He's been here for many, many years. He and his brother came from the Netherlands. They came here. His brother Paul, who was a great, great drummer, passed away recently. He was a fabulous drummer, so they were a really cool duo.
Wow.
And so Mark was actually subbed for Rocco like 20 years ago. He was a sub, and so we started playing together here in the Bay Area, with a bunch of guys that they still play together, and we just kind of fell in together, just like with Rocco, and so his concept is very Rocco-like, but he also has a whole jazz sensibility about his playing, understands all the Latin stuff really well, also self-taught.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But he can read. He's a reader. He understands harmony and all of that stuff. Things that Rocco wasn't really interested in. Rocco just was playing, right?
Right.
But Mark, he's got the whole other. He's got some academic thing going on as well. But he fits with the band really, really well. So for me, he's the perfect replacement, if you want to call it a replacement, the perfect person, let's say, not a replacement, the perfect person to carry on the tradition that Rocco, established, because Rocco's not, you don't replace somebody like that,
Right, right. The way you speak of Rocco, it almost makes me think of like Jocko in a way, even though Jocko's a different thing, but he carved his own path completely, right?
Guys like that, they just think about stuff different than other people.
Right.
They just have a different way they relate to music and the way they hear things, and it's very, very different. We were playing at UCLA one time with Herbie Hancock at the Royce Hall at UCLA in Southern California, and Jocko had shown up to the gig pounding on the door of the backstage door, and they wouldn't let him in, and he's holding his bass out of the case. He's holding his bass because he wanted to come and sit in with us. And he's pounding on the door. They wouldn't let him in. And so when he did get in, it was after we played and all of that, I'm just thinking, man, this is a Rocco type of individual, just got his own sort of thing, just his own sort of vibe. You know,
Oh
I
my
remember
God.
when Rocco passed and they did the tribute, the Berkeley College, did the tribute to him, um, which was really a beautiful, beautiful thing organized by Steve Bailey and Victor Wooten. They did a fabulous job, and it was just cool, So all these guys, all the people that we all listen to and admire, bass players, they're all there, paying respect to Rocco,
Wow.
And so the thing that they all mentioned how they were, had studied Rocco, and Rocco's, popular with bass players and all this other stuff. The thing that a lot of them don't understand is that Rocco's technique wasn't technique. it was
Right.
all wrong. Rocco's technique was completely not. He made up his own way to do stuff, and people just didn't realize that. I think we did clinics in Italy one time, and we did the first couple of them, and Rocco's not saying very much. He's just letting me do all the talking and kind of directing traffic. And I told her, bro, you have to speak. You have to tell people what you do, man, because people are going to love it. So reluctantly, he says, okay. So he told people kind of how he did things, the technique that he used with the two fingers, muting the strings and all that other stuff, completely unbass-like, Well, Italian people, they went nuts, because Italian people, they like, if you're a little bit flawed and you're honest about it, they think that's just the coolest thing ever. So you couldn't shut him up after that. And he realized that people, how much they were responding to it, And then it became a real cool thing. Then he really explained what he did, and, wasn't afraid to do it, and, wasn't self-conscious. I think maybe part of his thing was he was self-conscious because he's not a schooled musician, and the way he explains things is not really in an academic way.
Right. Not in musical terms. So.
Yeah, no, it's like Rocco style.
Yeah.
And it was perfect, because it depicted the kind of person that he was, and also that if you're creating, that's what this is all about, is creating.
Right.
It's nothing, we all get into, like, the books we study and the teachers and this and that, but really how you put that stuff into practice in your playing is you create with it. You create a voice with it. You create, solutions with the stuff that you study. And so, like Mark Twain says, don't let school get in the way of your education. I mean, that was like Rocco, right there, man. And I think that's the best way to find your voice, is to create.
Yeah.
Create. Just make this shit up.
Yeah. Well, look at the catalog of Groove through the Tower stuff. You and Rocco were laying down stuff that nobody was doing, and that no one had ever heard before, and you guys kind of brought this different lens, that because you guys were kind of collaborating and writing sort of these grooves together, and you brought a lens for people to look through that no one had ever seen before. So you two are like the perfect, combination of artistry, without the schooling, to mess it all up, in a way, right? Kind of.
I mean, it's like kind of like still very garage band-ish, That's still kind of the vibe of Tower, And with Rocco, because he didn't have, really a lot of, knowledge about what he was doing, how I would work with him is I would, like when we did Oakland Stroke, for instance, I remember we were rehearsing it, and it was a jam that we had, I don't know, put together a year or so, even more maybe, before, and we would just mess with it at rehearsals. And we needed a song to finish that album, the Back to Oakland album, and that was the one. We didn't even have a name. We didn't have anything. We just had the drum beat. So I told Mimi, the leader, Emilio, let's do this. Let's mess with this. So we're starting to put it together, and I tell Rocco, played the beat for him, and I said, there's 2 places where the hi-hat opens, and I showed him those things. And I says, so just try, and I would never insist that I would just suggest it. And so I said, where those open hi-hats are, don't play anything. And in the other spots, play anything you want, and let's just see what happens. I had to always end it up with, let's just see what happens.
Right.
So eventually, over the years, I would do that with Rocco, and one time he says to me, I know what you're doing. It was so interesting.
Oh, that's great.
He said, I know what you're doing.
Pulling that reverse psychology stuff on me.
Yeah.
Oh man. Wow. Well, I did want to mention also, it's kind of funny, when I kind of heard about Tower Power, this is kind of a really funny thing, but I had heard probably, What Is Hip, and I heard a couple of tracks. And so I didn't know much about the records yet. I think I was a kid. And so I went out and I just went to the rack and I picked the first record I could find, because I don't think it listed the personnel on the album, and I may not have known yet at that time, but it was a white cover, and I pull it out, and it's Ain't No Stopping.
Ain't nothing stopping us now.
Ain't No Stopping Us Now. So I get that record, and I bring it home, and I was so disappointed because I'm listening, and I'm like, this does not sound like what I thought it was going to sound like, right? Not realizing that you had not played on that, and it was a totally different vibe. And
yeah.
And then it wasn't until later that, so then I was like, oh man, well, that wasn't it. And then I went back and bought some other records, and then really started to find it. But it's funny that the first one I get is like, wait a minute, that can't be the same. Yeah.
No, I mean, I did that. I left the band like 4 times.
Right.
Over the years, because there was a period where, the band was just a bunch of drug dealers and crooks and, criminals and low-life people, and didn't start out that way, but that's the way they became for a while, and it just was really difficult to be in it. So I'd come back and, and I'd leave, come back and it's still messed up, so I'd leave again, that kind of deal.
Yeah. Well, that's self-preservation, right? So,
yeah.
Plus you did a lot of cool things when you left. And one of the things, I mean, I was playing in like a local fusion band in New York, playing the clubs and everything, like Visionis, and we even played the Village Gate, like a bunch of the clubs. And I think at the time you were playing with that band Wishful Thinking,
mm-hmm.
which I kind of always thought of as like your solo project, although that was a real band, right? I mean, it was a band. It wasn't like a session gig that you did on the side. That was a unit. And that record,
it was an actual band, and that was like, we were the only one at the time like that in L.A.
Yeah.
And so, the L.A. was like a predominantly a freelance scene. It's kind of everybody's mix and match, and so, all the gigs that I would do, they just calling people. So you do the gig, and next gig is going to be different people on it, right?
Right.
So with us, we didn't do any subs. We kind of wrote our own music, of course, and our gigs was us, So it was a cool thing.
That the record that I had heard, I think it was called Way Out West, maybe?
Way Down West.
Way Down West, yeah. Really interesting stuff on that record. Very groove-oriented kind of stuff. But that was kind of the direction that my band was trying to head, so it was very influential. And there's one track where at the end of the track, you guys are sort of modulating the groove and you keep shifting it. And it's a really interesting little moment. I can't remember the name of the track. Might have been Outbound. At the end of the track, and you guys were, yeah. And it was like kind of, that was 80, 80s, 88?
Mid 80s.
Yeah, mid 80s. And you guys were doing this really tricky kind of metric modulation thing at the end that you hear people, kind of overusing now. But yeah, very cool stuff. Um, and I also saw that you listed the Yellow Jackets in the discography, or not the
Yeah.
discography, but in. So when did you play with the Yellow Jackets?
It was never live. We did a movie,
Oh,
Star Trek 4, I think,
oh, really?
and the Star Trek soundtrack.
Huh. Yeah, I was not aware of that. So when I saw that, I had to ask you about it because that was
Well,
another group that.
I was at the time also working with Gino Vanelli, and
Right.
so we were recording a lot. And Jimmy Haslip, who was the bass player
Yeah.
with the Yellow Jackets at the time, was also, involved with Gino. So
Got it.
I just did, got that gig, the Yellow Jackets thing through him.
Wow. Okay. Good. Good to know that. I thought that was kind of interesting, and I'm gonna throw out some drummer names, and I just want to know what your reactions are.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, yeah. So and I just thought, I thought just brief, like, what's your initial reaction to each guy. So,
Yep.
and I'm going old, early, and then going forward. But
Okay.
I'm
I
gonna
hope I
say,
know these people. I
you
hope I know
will,
who they
you will.
are.
So Earl Palmer.
Oh, history. Little Richard and all that stuff, kind of from a New Orleans guy, was also in the Wrecking Crew, that legendary recording band, in LA. He was part of that. One of the first guys to put together, the drum set kind of funky beats and all that stuff,
Yeah,
make something of it, and just the kindest person. He knew what everybody was doing. So when I eventually did meet him and I'd run into him, you know, over the years and see him different stuff, we'd talk about all these different guys, and he knew everything I was doing. He just knew what everyone was doing. He
yeah,
was very aware. You know, just a gentleman, cool guy.
yeah. Actually, I have Daniel Glass coming on soon as a guest, and he did that Roots of Rock and Roll with Steve Smith, and
Yeah.
there's some interviews, some great interviews of some of the early players, and there's some interview footage of Earl Palmer. What about I'm gonna have to jump down the list a little bit because I want to get to a couple other things, but how about
Uh-oh.
Zigaboo Modaliste?
Zig is a pretty cool guy. He's like a guy that really influenced me with all that meter stuff. Uh, he was he's just a funny guy, man, and was doing some stuff in the early '70s, late '60s that no one was doing. I mean, he was from the future, you know. And we did a gig with the Meters once in Louisiana. It was in Thibodaux, Louisiana, and I don't know how it happened, but nobody came to the gig. No one came.
Wow.
So in order to get paid, we played.
Oh my God.
So yeah. So don't ask me why that happened. There was just some guests that showed up, but no one came. It
Oh
was the
my God.
weirdest thing ever. But it was just, and it was all the original Meters guy. It
Oh
was
wow. I'll give you a couple others. Billy Cobham.
another cool guy.
You met Billy early on, right?
Yeah, we were playing in Chicago on one of our first, it might have been our first tour. We were playing in Chicago on Rush Street at a place called the Beavers Club. And he was playing with Dreams, and they came
Yeah.
in to the club to check us out. And so that's where we met. And just a gentleman, fabulous player, of course, innovative, you know.
Right.
but a super cool human being.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, I mean, in my mind, my drum heroes that you're among, all of you guys have this really different voice that you brought to the table. And it's, in this list of guys, I equate you all this kind of the same. You and Zigaboo and Billy Cobham and Steve Gadd and all these different guys. You all have this individual voice, it's real individualism and creative force. Let me
Just don't
throw.
copy. Just don't copy anybody.
That's right.
You
Don't
know,
copy anything.
if you do copy anybody, don't let anybody else hear it.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you're going to copy it, try to eventually make it your own.
Yeah, turn it into something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So copying it, we all do it anyway. So that's
Michael Shreve.
Shreve. Michael Shreve, I met in the very early years of Tower of Power. He came to see us play in Oakland at the On Broadway, where had a Monday and Tuesday night gig, and also in the beginning when we started playing there, nobody came, and then when our record came out, first one East Bay Grease, and we started making some noise around there. Then there were lines around the block and all this other stuff, and so Michael came, and of course I knew who he was because of, Santana and all
Right.
that stuff, and we just became really good pals. He even invited me to come to live at his house. So, and we would jam and all this other stuff. He had this house in Mill Valley, and so I lived over there for a while, and it was just a fabulous musical, cool thing, And then they took us on the road. So Tower was, we were still trying to get things going, and I had happened to meet Michael, of course. And they took us on the road with Santana, and then Doug Clifford with Creedence Clearwater. That was so those two bands who were the biggest thing at the time, and they took us on the road and kind of gave us our first big exposure.
What a way to cut your teeth, like going out to arena gigs with those guys.
And also, Bill Graham was our first manager, so he would kind of put us on all these shows. But but with Michael and Santana, over the years we've done many shows with those guys all over the world, all over the place.
Yeah. And you guys have stayed super close ever since, right?
Yes,
and
sir.
so you have this wonderful group called Stick People
Yeah.
that
People, yeah.
gets together, right?
Yeah.
And has now become like a whole nother entity.
Yeah.
Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Stick People was I think it was like Mike Clark or Michael Shreve, one of those guys who there was some interview that happened, and so they wanted to get together and just talk about it. And I think it was Lenny and Michael Shreve and Mike Clark, right? And so we got together, and they said, well, let's do this again, right? So I said, well, you got to have Greg in here. I mean, if we're going to have Bay Area guys,
Right.
you can't do this without having Greg because he's the godfather of the whole thing. And so it's Greg Arico, Michael Shreve, Mike Clark, and Lenny White. And Lenny White is in it because he came out here and actually played with Chick and Stanley, the original Return to Forever, at Keystone Corner in San Francisco. And that's where I first heard Lenny, was with those guys.
Wow.
And then he came out here also. He was playing out here with Pete Escovedo and a band called Azteca.
Yeah.
And played with Joe Henderson out here because Joe lived in San Francisco. So he kind of became a Bay Area transplant. He brought all of his New York kind of vibe, and all that stuff, and came out here, and we were doing all the funk and all that crazy stuff, and he loved it, and we loved him. So he just kind of fit, And Mike Clark, he was like kind of one of the very first people that I met after I got out of the military. I got out in December 1969, came back, started playing gigs, and we met almost like immediately.
Wow.
And Paul Jackson, him and Paul, they were playing together already, you know. And so that's where we met.
Wow.
Michael Shreve, of course, explained that relationship. Greg with Sly, you know, he was playing with Sly Stone, I think when he was 16 or 17 years old. And Sly was a DJ here in the Bay Area. And he was on the radio every night. And then he had his band, you know. So Greg was like legendary here.
Yeah.
So we got together and then discovered how cool it was. So they thought, let's do it again. And then it turned into 3 days a week. So we started in April of last year and became therapy, you know. So we talk about everything, movies, food, stupid stuff, touring, family, being in a band, rhythm section, drummers, just talk about all kinds of stuff. And so then we decided, well, what if we did some sort of podcast thing, or at least put together something that we could, you know, interview people and talk about stuff.
Yeah.
So we tried for a long time to sort of figure out what we were going to do. And then I had this friend who's a record marketing guy, and he's done so much promotion and marketing over the years. I've known him for years. He was involved also with San Francisco Jazz, Center. He was at the University of Pacific, Dave Brubeck Library,
Oh, wow.
record company stuff, just so he got involved with us. And now we have a video editor, and we're putting these episodes together. So the first one was Dennis.
Yep.
And then Peter Erskine. I think the next one is Stanley Clark.
Wow.
And so we've got a bunch of stuff coming up. In the last 2 weeks, we did Eric Harland, Antonio Sanchez, Marcus Gilmore, and Mark Juliana.
Wow, not too shabby. And
Yeah.
what's interesting is most podcasts are one host and the guest, or maybe two hosts and a guest.
Yeah.
So you guys have a panel. So that's pretty interesting, because you get all these different viewpoints coming up, right, as you speak to these folks. And I saw some of the Dennis one and Peter Erskine. Prayers to Peter Erskine. He's going through some health stuff.
He's going to be okay, But
Yeah.
yes, for sure that.
Yeah.
But, we just talk to these people and ask them questions maybe that other people wouldn't ask,
Right.
Get them to talk about stories and, their experiences and that kind of thing. It's really, really a cool thing, So in talking with these people, and everybody's very, very different, kind of going back just another step is the five of us. Everybody plays very, very differently and had different bands and different music that we all played in, right?
Yeah.
And we would go to each other's gigs and hang out, but we never sounded like each other. And so these guys that we're having on the show, these are all people that we really like for their individual sort of thing and their creative sort of vibe. The way they think is just different they're just different animals.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. When you really want to say something, you have to just kind of forget what everybody else is doing and say what you want to say what you'd like to say on the instrument.
Right.
Because, this is art, no more, no less. And it can be whatever you want it to be. And I think that's what makes it so fabulous. You look at all the players we admire. Well, what is it that we admire about them? Well, they bring something different to the table. They bring themselves to the table, right? And we can all do that if we would look at the thing that inspires us, that really excites us about music, and just do that, whatever it is. Build it. And that's what all of these Stick people, all these other people that we're talking about, that's what they've all done. They've turned kind of their inspiration into a voice, you know.
And it's kind of come from an honest place.
Well,
You know?
if you're creating and you're kind of like following the muse, it can't be anything but honest. I mean,
That's right.
it's you.
Yeah, you and I were
Oh,
talking earlier about, I mentioned Mark Juliana, that you just interviewed him, and I think he has a really interesting individual voice and way of looking at things.
yes, he does.
His lens is really different, and he's one of the younger cats, that have come up, and it's just cool to see that level of creativity.
Well, we had on Friday we did Marcus Gilmore,
Yeah.
and he's Roy Haynes' grandson. A lot of people don't know that. But he
Wow.
comes from a serious lineage, and check out some of his videos. Eric Harlan, we had him on. I mean, check out his stuff. He does that the Rhythm of Revolution. It's a cool video on YouTube, and he's playing brushes and he's talking as he's playing, and the phrases that he's saying, the rhythms that he's saying, he's playing them in time,
Yeah.
on the snare drum. It was so hip. So he's another guy who thinks somewhere else. Then we had Antonio, and Antonio's talking about, this whole process of the Birdman
Yeah.
movie, how he composes and all that stuff.
That's amazing. That
Yeah,
whole soundtrack.
yeah. His grandfather, and I'm not going to try to remember his name because I won't, which I didn't know. His grandfather is one of the most famous actors in Mexico.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes, his grandfather. He's in his 90s,
Huh.
stage and screen actor in Mexico.
Oh my God. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he's got awards and all this other stuff. Quite a. Antonio comes from quite a lineage. Really interesting.
Speaking of, using the voice in a different way, Daphne's Prieto.
Oh,
Um,
there's another one.
yeah, man. Oh my God. Like I've seen him, his clinic live, and seen him at Smoke in New York City, and seen him in clubs, and when he comes out and just plays clave and sings all the rhythms over it, it's just unbelievable. And he thinks in a whole different way as well.
Yeah, that's that's what creative people are, man. That's what makes them different, is because they're not listening to everybody else. They're kind of, well, they're listening, but then they're distilling it down into kind of what they'd like to say.
Yeah.
And everybody's different. You don't have to play like everybody else. There's no rule that says you have to. There's no correct way to do stuff. People argue about technique and all these other things. Well, if one definition I read about technique was that it's a method of procedure.
Right.
Well, what's a method of procedure? How many methods of procedure are there? It's endless,
Right.
right? And so whatever you can do to make your music happen, that's what you do. And it doesn't have to follow some script. Write your own script.
Right.
Well, that's what you do. I mean,
I try.
you're playing, you're teaching, you got your whole technology thing. You understand that and how that works with this. Who else is doing that now? So you've figured out a way for yourself that excites you, that's creative, that feeds into a lot of things, that you do.
Yeah.
You've put all this together into a path. And that's what it is. You create a path for yourself. You see something that excites you and you go, "Wow, man, that's it. I'm doing that."
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And it's
It's
that
like that.
path is different for every single person.
You can say that again.
Yeah.
And so everybody says, I've heard this, and actually I'll use this one example. I have a friend who sent me some written material, and I've known this guy for a long time. He actually was a student of mine at one time. He is very talented, super talented. And so I said to him, man, you should make a little notebook with this stuff. Do something with this. It's really, really cool. But his view is that the sense of, well, what can I add? What can I add? What is there? It's already being done. But that's not true.
Right.
That's just his viewpoint, because all of this is about the story you tell yourself. If you tell yourself no, then it's no. Right? You tell yourself yes, it's yes.
It's on.
So, and it's really like that. There's another quote that I heard recently that I thought was really cool, and I used it with some of my students, and it really works good. You say, well, are you a verb or are you a noun? Think about it.
Yeah.
So verbs are action words, right? Nouns are like things.
Yeah.
You don't want to be a thing.
Exactly.
You don't want to be you're a verb. You want to have action to what you do. You want things to move,
Right. Yeah. It's I've heard Dom Famularo say if you tell yourself no, you're right. If you tell yourself yes, you're right.
Right. That's true.
It's either way, you're going to do exactly that.
That's right. That's right. So the story you tell yourself is so critical, man. And the people that I work with, even with the students that I have, and we work on the story
Right.
that they tell themselves. And just by changing the way that they think about what they do, they improve.
Yeah.
I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is just point them in a direction, and they do the rest. They get excited,
Yeah. Planting seeds.
Exactly.
People that teach plant seeds and then let them go cultivate and grow it,
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
sir.
true. We kind of went over a bit here, but before we wrap up, would you want to take a couple of questions if there's anybody in the chat?
Sure.
We'll field a couple before we wrap it up.
Sure.
Okay. So real quick, let's just see what we got. Let me hit the chat window here. Oh my goodness. All right. Let's see if I go to the top of this window here. Okay. Oh, very cool. Lucia was the first one in here. It was a young student of mine, very young student of mine. She's just saying hi. Peter Retzlaff is in here, New York drummer, jazz drummer, educator. Let's see. We have any questions? Let's see. Everybody's saying hello to each other. Dom Famularo's in here.
Hey.
Hey, Dom. Dave Stanhope is in here. Good friend of ours, mutual friend.
Yeah.
Real quick, what do we got here? Michael Scott's in here from Ontario, Canada.
Yep.
Don O'Keefe. We once opened for Tower Power in a small club in PA back in the 90s, playing with the Pat McGuire Band. I believe he had just recently reconnected with the band at the time. I gave him a CD. I don't know if you remember that, but there you go. Okay.
I don't, but thank you.
Ross says, Mr. Garibaldi, is your Tower of Power transcriptions off the record available digitally?
I'm not sure if Hudson has done that one yet. They might have. Hudson has all of the Alfred material, all the books, So I'm not sure if that's one of them.
Well,
Might
I know that the Funky Beat is digital.
They're kind of gradually converting all of that catalog into their digital format. So if it's not available now, it will be at some point.
Right. Awesome. Stanhope. Let's see. Anthony Cusina says hello. Sergio Bellotti says hello.
Wow. Cool.
Sergio's another southpaw like me, and I've
I
been
am.
helping him with his tech.
I'm a southpaw.
Oh, you're a lefty by nature, right?
Well, yeah, sort of left and right,
Yeah.
both. Kind of screwed up, but
So which hand do you eat with?
left. But all sports with like I write with my left hand. All sports was right-handed.
Huh.
Sitting down at the drum set, my first inclination was to start with my left hand, but on a right-handed drum set because nobody said to me, "Well, you could just turn it around." So, you know,
That's pretty funny. Well, did you move when you put the second hat in? That was because you felt it was just more practical, right, to play
yeah,
in an open position.
correct.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not literally reversing the the parts.
Right.
It's just opening your hands up.
Yep. John Gill says hello. Al Hannaborn says hello. Lots of hellos. Not really questions. Nobody really had questions. They're probably just listening. So that's cool. Nice crowd in there tonight, though. That's very good. Um,
Well, some of these guys I know, so they've probably heard all my stories already. So that's why I didn't really ask them.
well, I'll tell you, man. We spent a lot of time over the last year, and even doing the article together for Rhythm Magazine, and dialing in our tech. And I've a lot of the guys that are in here tonight. I've done all the tech with them, and it's pretty cool. We were kind of I always say that the playing field kind of got leveled when the shutdown happened, so everybody had to jump into this tech game. But isn't it gonna be great when we kind of just go back to like just worrying about playing drums and not,
Well, yeah, I'm still worried about it. I'm still, you know, what you did. The thing that's different now is you made everybody buy cables,
and dongles, cables
and
and
dongles. Yeah,
dongles.
you made everybody buy all that stuff. So
Yeah, it was funny. Every time we met, you were like, "What? We need another cable? Come on! How
I
many
got a
more
cable
cables am I
store
gonna
now.
get?"
If any of these guys out there are listening, they need some cables. Let
Buy
me know.
stock in cable companies. Um, all right, just a couple real quick rapid fire questions. Favorite food? Go.
Oh, any kind of Italian food
Okay. And it,
style, not a specific thing, but
right. And your wife is probably a great cook. Yes.
she is. She's
Born
a
in
very
Italy.
good cook. Yep, she's a very good cook, and that's the difference between having Italian food and food that's cooked by an Italian.
That's right.
Right. So on the road with Tower guys, we'd go eat all these restaurants. We love Italian food, so they would always say if it wasn't any good, it was Italian. If it was
That's
good,
right.
it was Italian. You know.
There's a lot of truth to that when you're out on the road, for sure. Pizza as
It's
well.
Italian food. Yeah.
Favorite adult beverage?
Oh, wine, red wine,
I knew that, but I had to ask anyway. Favorite pizza topping?
salami.
Ah, nice.
Sorry.
I haven't gotten that. First drum you ever owned?
Slingerland drums. I still have them.
Wow. You still have your first kit?
I do.
Oh, that's awesome. I had my first kit up until about a year ago. That was dumb. I gave it to a student, so I guess that's okay. I gave it to a student of mine, and that was a good thing. So,
Yeah.
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 Oh, one quick question. Oh, Jim Payne's in here. Ha ha. Jim Payne says, "Tell us an event in your youth that made you think, yeah, I want to be a pro drummer."
Well, I went to see James Brown. I mean, that was
Yep.
it. Really. Saw the James Brown band at the San Jose Civic Auditorium, and
Clayton
the
Filio was on
first
drums.
Clayton Filio was the drummer, I believe,
Yeah.
and it was the same band that was live at the Apollo. And so my friends said, "You ever see James Brown?" "No, man. Well, you're going to go with us. We're going to go check out James Brown." So he was always here in the Bay Area playing different places and on the radio all the time. So we go down there in the afternoon and we walk up to the front door. It's open. We go in. they're rehearsing.
Oh my God.
So we go in and we watch them rehearse. And we're the only guys in there, just us. And we go up to the front of the stage and we're kind of looking up at them, and they kind of ignored us and let us just hang out. So we watched them play. And then I saw the show that night. I'd never seen anything like that ever.
Right.
I thought, this is cool. I want to do this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that would be the moment that I decided that I was going to do that kind of thing, Couldn't do it, but
planted the seed.
Yeah. That was the moment, yes.
Oh, awesome. All right. One other thing. So last thing. The first record you ever bought.
I don't remember. It probably was James Brown.
Probably, right?
Seriously, it was probably Live at the Apollo.
Yeah.
Because when I had that, I just played it over and over and over and over and over again. It was probably that.
And how are you staying in shape these days? Because you're in fantastic shape.
Well,
You're biking, right?
Train. Well, I cycle. I've strength trained. I have a personal trainer I've worked with for years.
Nice.
I do that. Yoga. Walking. I do something every day. So.
Little Lucia says, random question: do you prefer listening to music on vinyl records or on your computer or phone?
I like listening to music with headphones.
Yeah.
So wherever that is, phone. If you have good headphones, the fidelity on your phone is really good.
Right.
Streaming is really good. I don't have a record player anymore. I have records though. I still have my record collection, but I don't have a record player anymore.
Neither do I. Yeah, I let it go. Oh man. Well, I have to say, man, this was fantastic hanging with you again, and we got to do it in a live streaming format, so everybody could kind of hear a little bit of the story. I was trying to, basically direct this in ways that weren't the same old questions being asked, because I know you've done a lot of interviews, and we got a rare treat, and we got to listen to you play some of your ideas at the top, which I'm so happy that you did that.
I'm glad you did. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. This is super fun. I'm sure we'll be talking again pretty soon about other.
Yeah, because there could be some 911 calls coming. You know that. So.
Well, maybe I'll be calling you with some 911 groove calls, right? So
whatever you want to do, man.
Yeah, man. So we're gonna get it wrapped up. Rick Latham's in here, by the way. Says hello.
Hey. What's up, brother?
Yeah, man. So nice crowd here tonight. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. And there'll be some more great live streams coming up. But this was, for me, was a huge treat. And thank you so much, David Garibaldi, for taking the time and hanging out with us.
You're welcome, brother.
All right, man. We're gonna get this wrapped up, and I'll be on Thursday night for the Hand Technique Workshop, and then back on Monday with Stanton Moore. And we'll talk to you guys real soon. Have a good night, everybody.